This video is sponsored by my own two hands. And yes, I did play this game with both of my hands. So sometime last week, I came across one of, if not the most culture-heavy gacha games I've ever encountered in my entire career that isn't gonna be on a, corn site. Fast forward a couple of weeks later, and here I am in my completely unbiased, unsponsored review of Brown Dust 2 in 2026. I want to break down why this is going to be currently one of, if not my favorite side gachas, standing comfortably right next to Honkai Stereo, as well as at this moment I was a Star Savior, and as of this recording, I've clocked in well over 100 hours, pushing deep into the endgame on an account that I pretty much just built from scratch 2 weeks ago. Disclaimer, due to the absolutely insane amount of culture radiating from the screen, we are going to run this review with heavily censored footage so that my editors and I can still have a platform when this video is going to be over. And yes, you heard that right, I am going to be intending to make more Brown Dust 2 content on my main channel for the foreseeable future. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. So a quick overview for Brown Dust 2, it is gonna be pretty much a XCOM chess game with a fan service plastered all over the user interface, and that was pretty much what I expected going in, except I was completely wrong. The game features an ungodly amount of strategic depth as well as min-maxing. We're talking grid positioning, team building, skill order, knockback mechanics, as well as a absolutely insane roster of costumes which are going to be your units to mix and match to make your very own best-in-slot team. The overworld graphics you'll see for majority of the gameplay is very reminiscent of a classic old-school 8 to 16-bit JRPG, and honestly, if you were to toggle off the scale animation which can be seen from the silhouette mode from the game, it would look like a very standard turn-based combat game. The main story for Brown Dust 2 follows a classic medieval JRPG format where you're going to be starting off with Leto, traveling the world as well as gathering his allies. The main campaign's narrative is pretty grounded and fully voice acted for both the MSQ as well as all of the event quests as well as their special interactions, which unfortunately I can't really show on this video over here. The real gooner part of Brown Dust 2 is going to be more or less contained in your event stories, which acts like a multiverse ranging from summer cruisers, casinos, and modern spies, or pretty much one incident where you're literally getting a job. So as someone who grew up loving turn-based games like Honkai Stereo, Hearthstone, and even Pokemon, the gameplay loop clicked with me instantly. So for any gacha game, I would judge its long-term favorability for my personal preference on 3 pillars: the gameplay, the gacha system, as well as the progression loop. So let's break down how Brown Dust 2 actually holds up with these 3 conditions. So first and foremost, for the gameplay as well as mechanics in Brown Dust 2, frankly speaking, this is gonna be a very in-depth tutorial if you really want to get down to the nitty-gritties as well as min-maxing for the absolute highest score, but I'll just make this a super summarized version. The tactical grid is pretty much where Brown Dust 2 is gonna be offering its unique selling point against other gachas, but it is also where you will be facing a learning curve. You have a very random amount of grid depending from 5x5, 3x4, 3x3, etc., depending on the combat, and this is entirely about where do you place your units as well as their skill order. You are not pretty much just matching the right elements, which you do have elemental advantage. You are also going to be using things like knockbacks, environment damage, who should be going first, who should be applying buffs, so that your DPS can wipe out the entire enemy target. And I'm just gonna quickly show you guys a live demonstration of an example of how combat works. So for example, this is gonna be your skill order, and every single one of these icons are gonna be your unit's respective ultimates. You can notice that some of these units have multiple ultimates that is gonna be determined by the costumes. So don't worry about the costume system for now because it's very unique to Brown Dust 2, but you can pretty much just think of whenever you pull for a new unit in Brown Dust 2, it is not really exactly a whole new unit if they are gonna be having 2 different costumes for the same unit. For example, right here I have the normal Dark Saintess Liberta, but this is gonna be the Onsen Liberta, where even though it's gonna be 2 separate SSRs, or in this case URs, they are still gonna be considered as one unit, and you want to stagger on their ultimates depending on which one you want to activate first, right? So for this particular scenario, the general very rough summary for Brown Dust 2 is you always want to apply your buffers first, very much similar to Honkai Stereo, where your supports will apply all the different buffs you can see over here. You're going to be getting a 115% attack as well as a crit rate buff, then this is going to give you crit rate as well as crit damage buff, and this is going to give you a massive 80% attack into a 50% attack buff. So after you stack on their 3 respective buffs, which is going to add on to all of your DPS as long as you're going to be within this range, as you can see from this green tile over here, that's where your DPS can let go of their respective ultimates. And yes, every single one of these ultimates also causes this thing right here, which is going to be the exact same skill point system in Starville, except in Brown Dust 2, it is gonna be very, very different. So the absolute max is gonna be 20, and depending on the environment Brown Dust 2, sometimes if for example in PvP mirror match, you're only gonna be starting off with 5, sometimes you're gonna be starting off with 15, which is majority of all of your story stages, and other times you might be having another couple of different scenarios. So as long as you have enough skill points for your very first burst, you can see every single one of these skill points are gonna get used up over here, right? So that is pretty much how turn order as well as skill management work in this game. And then for the majority of the buffing capabilities in Brown Dust 2 is split into physical as well as magic DPS. So for this particular team that I'm using, it is going to be physical. And looking at the priest over here, this is going to be another example of a magical team where you want to buff your magic attack. So whenever they say an attack buff, this is purely just for physical DPS, but for now you do not have to worry about it. So the majority of this loop, because the Destroy are going to be your supports, then you are going to be looking at where your DPS is aiming. So right here, my Sacred Justia is pretty much going to aim on this tower right here. You can see from this range. So her attack is going to be hitting every single one of these units on the enemy. So if this damage is going to kill every single one of them, then the next hit, which is going to be my Oceanside Luvenencia, is pretty much always going to direct this target onto the next target, right? So that is a very, very brief summary of how this battle system actually works. And if you can see the enemy attacks, you can also see what their moves are going to be, and all of their targeting, it is going to be preordained within this XCOM combat. So once you have set your skill orders as well as your position in the grids, which will affect where your skills actually land, then you can just press start battle, which is right here, and then everything will just flow like clockwork where there's no speed tuning. It is purely just your turn, their turn, your turn, their turn, based on the respective unit order, right? One very important thing is the turns here actually refers to 2 turns instead of 4, because every single time your turn begins, then the enemy is going to have a turn 2, and then by the time it's your turn, it's already going to be turn 3, right? So just take that into consideration. So I'm going to press start, and then every single one of these units have their unique ultimate animation, which is where a lot of the culture aspect comes in. So for this particular mode, I'm just going to be censoring, so you can't really see it at all. So you can definitely play this game without this censored mode to make yourself, you know, just don't do this in public. But at home, this is pretty much going to be how the combat system will be looking like in Brown Dust 2. And this stage over here is pretty much going to be my event. So once you're going to be done with this particular stage, I'm going to be on the hard difficulty, where you can actually have a quick skip function to instantly skip through all of the and just jump straight into the next battle. So with the basic gameplay established, I would say that the daily loop for your Brown Dust 2 is actually really, really quick, especially if you're gonna be someone that do not want to spend too much time playing this game. You can clear your daily sweeps in Hunting Ground as well as your commissions, your daily quests, weekly quests, with a very, very efficient way of going about it. Within 10 minutes, I would say you can pretty much do your entire dailies. If you want to play the game a little bit more, especially for your endgame PvE, like your Fiend Hunts, or if you want to grind a little bit more in PvP, then that could also be in your cup of tea as well. So overall gameplay for Brown Dust 2, I will give this a very, very solid 8 out of 10 for now, with my very limited knowledge of how this game actually is. Because remember, I only played this game for roughly 2 weeks, so my understanding and knowledge within Brown Dust 2 is definitely going to be way more limited compared to people that have been playing this game for the past 3 years, right? From what I'm understanding so far, this is a very, very nice little loop. Now, moving on into the next portion of Brown Dust 2, and that is going to be their gacha system. And yes, for any gacha games, I would say the gacha economy, not just whether or not you get more raids, less raids, more premium currency, it doesn't really matter. It really depends whether a player can reasonably obtain a high amount of units within a short span of time, especially for a new player starting out this gacha game, which has already been 3 years old. I would say so far from my personal experience, I have spent a little bit of money, but I have pretty much assembled a very, very impressive roster of units you can kind of just see. So this is going to be what my current account is going to be looking like, and yes, I have pretty much assembled a absolutely ridiculous amount of 5 stars, which is pretty much this game's highest rarity. Some of these units you can actually get them for free because you can just get them from the story. Other than that, you're just gonna be pulling from the gacha itself. And from my personal new player experience, even if you did not get any monetary expenditure, so as a complete free-to-play, because of the time that I started Brown Dust 2, which is going to be the 3rd anniversary, I am pretty sure just purely off of the events, the stories, the side quests, and every single thing you're going to be able to see from your screen over here, you can pretty securely get yourself well over 1,000 limited summons within Brawl Stars 2. And I am not exaggerating because that is just how many pulls you're going to be able to get. Of course, I have barely just scratched the surface of every single one of these. So for example, all of these event packs here, for every one clear is 10 limited summons. And then there are 3 difficulties. So that's 30 summons, 30 summons, 30 summons, 30 summons, and then you can get every single thing in your story quest, in your character pack, in your content pack. They will give you a lot of premium currency because Brawl Stars 2's entire gacha economy is one of, if not the most generous that I've seen in a very long time. Then if you take a look into the screen right here about the actual gacha itself, the probability for your SSR is gonna be pretty much 50-50 at a 3% base rate, slightly more than 50-50. So 1.5% for the rate up, and everything else is gonna be if you were to lose your 50-50. Unless the unit themselves actually says things like limited, it is, or rather special, it means that every single one of these units will eventually get added into their standard selector. So this is gonna be the standard selector, very reminiscent of those kind of standard banners where you can select from AFK games, where you will choose the costumes you want to pull within this 12 pool specifically. So in the future, whenever a new unit get added into the standard banner, you can just freely pick whichever unit you actually want. So when you pull and get yourself a 5-star, it can only be from within this 12 pool selector, which makes it a lot easier for a new player to start deciding which units they are going to be needing to build up their account from a fresh ground. Because as of this current moment in Brawl Stars, there's already like well over 100 different units and 100 different costumes. So obviously, if you do not have a 12 selection over here, you are going to be having a very hard time actually getting the units you want, especially for example the supports as well as multiple dupes of the DPS, right? Then this is gonna be the basic banner you see over here. This is gonna be the standard. This is gonna be the current brand new 3rd anniversary, where you have the one pick, so you are gonna be choosing exactly which one you want, and it's gonna be a 50-50 rate of this particular unit instead of every other unit. And then we do have a lot of limited banners because we do have the 3rd anniversary summer event. So if you want to get any of these reruns, you can consider it as well. And every single day upon reset, you also have yourself free 1 pool for all of these event banners. So you can just press Brawl free pool and can just get them every single day without fail. So that is pretty much going to be your unit banner. And then for the gear banner, especially if you're going to be a free-to-play or light banner, I would not recommend pulling for this because you can also get free pools from the daily summon. So every single day you can get 1 free pool. All of these over here 27, it is 27 free pools just for this specific banner. So it's 27, this one is also 27, and I eventually still managed to get every single one of this UR weapon purely just from the free summons, which is why in Brawl Stars 2, it really is just a matter of time before you actually get the unit or the 5-star weapons you actually want. Now, at this point of the video, I'm just gonna be talking about the elephant in the room. And yes, in Brawl Stars 2, dupes, especially for units, are pretty much non-negotiable. It is not one of those gacha games that you can only get like an E0 and you can just move on. Dupes are pretty much a necessity in Brawl Stars 2. So for example, taking a look at my onsen manager Liberta, at +1, it will essentially reduce your skill point consumption from 3 to 2. And like I mentioned at the start of this video, in combat, skill point is everything that you need to get yourselves the entire chain rotation going, applying your buffs, applying your debuffs, applying your DPS. So if you have access to the +1 dupe for Onsen Liberta, it will drastically make your team building experience a lot easier because DPS will also want their respective dupes to either increase the damage or to reduce the skill point consumption. So for every single one of the Brawl Stars 2 units, for example, right here, you can take a look at our Iron Model Will Hate email. This is gonna be your +0, so we're gonna be 0 dupes, and then at +1 dupe, this skill point goes up by 1. So for a lot, I would dare say almost every single unit in Brawl Stars 2, unless there are breakpoints for their dupes are gonna be very high, for example, +3 and above, you pretty much always want to get more dupes in order to make your unit stronger. So that is pretty much gonna be non-negotiable right there. But the good thing about this is because this game is so generous with their gacha pool currency, as well as the rates of you actually getting your SR, which is going to be 3%, much higher than the typical mainstream gacha rates, you are not going to be in any tough situations because as long as you keep playing this game, dupes will eventually come into your account, especially if you are going to be making use of the current 1-pick selective draw, where you just keep summoning and summoning to eventually you get that dupe itself, right? Aside from that, we also have our Spark system, which is going to be very reminiscent from old school gacha games. There is no hard pity per se, where you can guarantee yourself this unit, where you can get yourself a 5-star at every every single 100 summons. And yes, I have actually hit this 100 out of 100 summons for just a single 5-star, despite having 3% rate. So if it happens, it will happen, but you are never guaranteed a rate up unit unless you exchange them from this, which is gonna be with 200 PD points, exactly the same like older gacha games like Uma Musume, right? And at the end of this banner, if you do not exchange for this particular unit, it is gonna be going into your Powder of Hope, which is kind of like your spark tokens, which you can then use to go back into the shop right here and redeem for some really good and quality meta SSR units, which is gonna be these right here, which I personally also already redeemed, for example, Mamor as well as Luvanesia, right? So that is pretty much how the spark system as well as Gacha system works in Brown Dust 2. So just to summarize a little bit, in Brown Dust 2, pulling a duplicate doesn't just bump your damage returns because you are gonna be dealing definitely more damage, but also increase your overall buffs as well as most notably your skill point reduction, especially if you're gonna be reducing a skill point in a turn-based game where your entire team is dictated by how many skill points you use in that specific turn. This is gonna be absolutely crucial. But luckily for us in Brown Dust 2, the raw pool income of this game as well as the gacha rates are so high, it is pretty much just a matter of time before you eventually get yourself the extra dupes. I would say a tip for new players is to prioritize getting dupes from supports first over your DPS, because like every other turn-based gacha game, 铁打的辅助流水的主席, as long as you buff your supports, and your supports are going to be a high level, it doesn't really matter as much which main DPS you're going to be using. So overall gacha system for Brown Dust 2, I'm going to give this a very solid 8 out of 10. Now for the third factor in Brown Dust 2's quick review, and that is gonna be their unit progression. If there's one area in this game where you're gonna be basically min-maxing for the rest of your life, it is gonna be the classic gearing system for any of the traditional gacha games. Even in mainstream gacha games, gearing is pretty much something you're gonna be doing for the rest of your life. I would definitely make an entirely dedicated video just for this Brown Dust 2 if you guys are gonna be interested, because I think it's very unique and you can definitely make a lot of mistakes when you're trying to go and upgrade your gear. But I would say if you're going to be crafting gears in this game, you can actually get to I would say 90% of its effectiveness, even if you're not going to be chasing for the top 1% of gears. Because the higher you chase for its respective Brown Dust 2 gear, the more resources it's going to take you. So for a free-to-play player, within like the 80 to 85, 90%, your gear is pretty much going to be able to be more or less done, and it does in fact cost you a very little amount of resource. So using Sacred Justia as an example over here, this is going to be your info. We are going to be equipping your 5-piece. For this particular bond, it will only be active when you hit level 100, so don't worry about it for now. It will basically just give you this additional stats to give a little bit more HP, attack, as well as light damage. Then costume right here is gonna be where you're gonna be getting your dupes. So for example, as of this very moment, Sacred Justia only has herself a single costume, so the moment you want to bring this up to a higher degree, you can do so by getting more dupes right here. If you do not want to go for this, then this is gonna be your classic, your major tracers, minor tracers for a lot of these gacha games. All of these are minor nodes to give you a little bit more stats, and then for the big 3 nodes, they will usually consume this resource called the Tears of Goddess, which is gonna be seen from this particular upgrade right here. So for Tears of Goddess, this is a very limited resource. You can kind of just think of this as Echoes of War in Honkai Stario, so definitely use this more sparingly. I would prioritize on the supports over your DPS unless you use that specific DPS very frequently. So that is gonna be that for your tracers. I'm gonna go back to my Sacred Justia. So aside from your tracers as well as your dupes right here, we can kind of just see where the additional effects are gonna be at. There's this one more burst mechanic that literally just got added to the game, I believe, with this brand new update less than a month ago, where it kind of acts as like a Nova Flare for these units. So you can use this brand new currency called Spark of Rampage, where you can actually activate burst during combat, consuming more skill points but unlocking higher damage for your respective skill point consumption. So I would be very wary of using this resource, especially if you're a new player, because this item is very rare to come by, and even if you want to spend money in Brown Dust 2, it is not going to be very plentiful because they literally just came out very recently, right? So from what I see so far, for the new player, you don't have to worry about it, but that is pretty much going to be the 3 main ways as to how you're going to be upgrading your characters within the costume screen. And then for the very last screen in character progression, that is going to be the gearing system. And yes, in Brown Dust 2, as well as all of your different units, you have your team presets as well as your unit, or rather your gear presets. So you can actually save one set of gears. So for example, right here, this is gonna be giving us the additional magic resist set for my Sacred Justia. Then if you want to just change your gear into a physical tank set, right? So for example, this is gonna be giving us additional physical defense. Then we can just simply replace this And then we can just change this here as well to a physical tank set. And then we can just add this preset right here. So you have two different items, one for a set good against our MR enemies and one good for a set against physical attack enemies, right? So that's just going to be one example. You can also have another preset for like PvP gears because all of these main sets have their different respective users, but I wouldn't go too deep into details for now because gearing in Brawl Stars 2 is a very, very interesting topic. But generally speaking, you can pretty much just upgrade every single one of these gears because the resource you get in the early game is pretty plentiful, and then you are going to be using this to get a lot more crit rate, crit damage, attack, etc. I would say for a new player tip, crit damage is your #1 priority, especially for PvE content, because in Brawl Stars 2, there are a lot of units that buffs you crit rate. So for example, Liberta over here is going to be giving you your additional 50% crit rate if you can bring this all the way up to +5, which is gonna be very, very important for your overall DPS. And another unit that can buff crit rate is pretty much gonna be your roll. Okay, not this costume, but this costume right here, where you can get another 50% crit rate as well as a 300% crit damage buff at max limit break. So you're gonna be getting 100% crit rate relatively easy in PvE content, but for PvP, because you can't really use these buffers as frequently since you don't have enough skill points, then you do need to build a little bit more crit rate for your PvP gear. But for your start, especially your new player progression, just focus on crit damage, which is gonna be mainly seen from this piece right here. Anything with Venomous Touch, you can pretty much just use it for like almost every single PvE content in the game you can just use. You can kind of just see all of my gears. Almost every single one of my DPS units, they are going to be running Venomous Touch because that is just how prevalent PvE content is going to be for this gacha game. Now, for one last thing before I basically wrap up the career progression, this is pretty much the actual end game for your career development, where you are going to be aiming for the elusive SSS gear rating, which is going to give you a score of 24 points. The resources it would take you to actually get this to SSS is incredibly hard and on exponential level. So if you're going to be taking a lower gear, so for example, if this is going to be CCC, so it's going to be a 9 gear score. If you want to bring a CCC gear from 9 to 17, it can probably take you the same amount of resource just as it takes you from 17 to 18 or 19, right? So this is going to be completely RNG. So I will just do a demonstration right here. I'll just select max and it will stop immediately based on this resource on refining powder as well as gold. So I'm just going to hit this, and when this thing upgrades, I'm just going to skip. So this thing cost me roughly 19,000 of these stars over here to just go from a 17 to a 18. Whereas on the other hand, if I want to, for example, upgrade this gear right here, right? So you can see this is only going to be a 9 for a CCP. So if I want to bring this to the next level, then this is only going to cost me a grand total of 30 refinement, right? So it's very easy to upgrade an early start. So for example, if I were to just do like 100 times without skipping, so I'm just going to select 100, this is going to be going from 12 to 16, right? We're just spending 3,500 this does. So TLDR, the higher this number is going to be, the more difficult it gets to actually chase your elusive 24 gear score. So for the pure endgame players who are chasing for the PvE leaderboards of PvP, then maybe that's gonna be your objective. But for a new player, I would say a very good starting point for all of your UR4 gears are going to be seen from this 1V. That is gonna be the things that you want to upgrade to around level 17 to level 18, where it's gonna be giving you the highest bang for buck. So I would say, after everything being said and done, the character progression for my early game experience, it feels really easy, especially if you're just gonna be building from like 1 or 2 teams. You definitely need more than 2 teams in Brawl Stars 2 because there are a lot of different content. There is this a 20-man raid eventually you're gonna be trying on later on. So building multiple units is not gonna be something strange for you Brawl Stars 2 players. Eventually you're probably gonna be building like more than 20, maybe even 30 different units if you're gonna be playing this game long enough. And because of my hurdle, because this game gives you a ton of free resources as well for a better new player experience, I will give this as of right now a 8.5 out of 10. But maybe towards the end game when I want to chase the higher gear score, or when I run out of the Tears of Goddess for the major traces, that's gonna be where the bonus is gonna start coming in, which I'm gonna be thinking is gonna be more difficult at roughly 6 to 7 out of 10. Now, another thing which is not really related to my 3 main points on Brawl Stars 2, but as of this current moment, Brawl Stars 2 is gonna be having their 3rd anniversary summer cruise update as of this time of recording. The very next day as of this time, which is gonna be, I believe, the 18th of June, they are gonna be releasing the Swimsuit Grunt Hill Day, which is gonna be a very strong PvE unit, and then subsequently it is gonna be coming to Summer Terese. So all of these are super meta units. You don't have to worry who they are gonna be for now, but this is a very nice time to start Brawl Stars Brown Dust 2, especially by building up your limited pools right now. You can easily create a super competitive team, even if you're just going to be playing this game from the ground scratch up, even if you're going to be 3 years late. As of this moment, they also have other units like your Ocean Vanguard Luvenesia, which is pretty much going to be our current tier 0 Chaos DPS or like the Dark DPS, alongside with the 1-pick selectors, the 12 picks, a lot of different meta units to select exactly how do you get a good amount of roster to get your early game experience. And one last thing before I end off this entire video, and that is pretty much a shout out to the Brown Dust 2 community. I will say in my very short time streaming Brown Dust 2, I have got a very small but extremely helpful community members, which surprisingly I didn't know that many people in my chat actually play Brown Dust 2. They have been extremely helpful when it comes to the advice for team building, early game progression, which unit should I be putting for, how should I be spending my resources, my gears, links to like resources that I can check out for myself in Google Docs, in Bilibili, in YouTube. So all these have been incredibly helpful, and I would not be getting to where I am today with the level of understanding without the help of the Brown Dust 2 community. So I really appreciate the brand new influx of players as well as interest in my community in this game. So that'll be shout out to the Brown Dust 2 community. You guys might be gooners, but whenever I want to talk about like meta or like min-maxing, it has been extremely helpful so far. So with that, I am going to be coming on to the close of my summary in Brown Dust 2. I would say this game completely blew past my expectations. Went in there expecting very shallow fan service slop with like 0 longevity. I'm just going to play like 1 or 2 days, I'm going to quit. And I came out finding an extremely sophisticated, deeply tactical, grid-based RPG, which I have been playing every single day without fail as of right now. I would say Brown Dust 2 functions as a very nice little side game. You don't have to worry about the PvP, you don't have to worry about the competitive leaderboards. If you're just gonna be here for either the team building, the culture, or like the absolutely insane, cutscenes, then this game is definitely gonna be worth a time, right? So once again, this is not sponsored. Let me know what you guys think in the thoughts and comments down below. Word of the day is gonna be culture. Join Twitch, join Discord, use code POKE for 10% off gamer subs. All the best for Gacha Pools, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.